Good evening and welcome to the 2D podcast. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember we always stream live Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Central Time. If you want to catch us and be a part of the conversation, already a lot of people lining up in the chat room to be a part of the conversation. You can be a part as well. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn. What am I forgetting? Facebook, all those kind of things. You can be a part of it. We got a lot to get to tonight. Our first post-Super Bowl edition of the 2D podcast. Expectations for the Eagles next year. Actually, a lot of questions for them to answer. Can they answer them all? No coordinators, free agents all over the place. Is Jalen Hurts, at least officially an elite quarterback? JuJu tweaks Bradberry. Good idea? Bad idea? Where should Derek Carr play next year? Is Aaron Rodgers done in Green Bay? Todd Monken leaves Georgia. Why wouldn't you? To be the Baltimore offensive coordinator. What does that mean for Lamar Jackson? The Colts get it right with Shane Steichen, and the Cardinals get it right with Jonathan Gannon. And what does Eric Bieniemy have to do to be a head coach? Offensive coordinator jobs are what's being rumored for him right now. Maybe we'll get to who's next year's champion will be. Our thoughts early on. Maybe not. You just never know. It's up next here on the 2D podcast.
This is the Too Deep NFL Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. Too Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric is the senior VP of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. 2 Deep Podcast is proudly brought to you by Gannon Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannonAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gannon Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome to the 2D podcast. A lot to get to, as we said. We start with the Philadelphia Eagles, boys. It was almost enough to win a championship, but not quite good enough. Their quarterback played extremely well. We'll talk about him in a minute. But, Jeff, let's start with where they sit right now as they put 22 in the rearview mirror. What are your expectations for 23? Can this team bounce back and win the championship next year? Or are they a team that's got a lot more to work on than people may realize right now?
Well, they got some work to do. I mean, they'll be in the mix, but certainly it won't be as exciting of a time in Philadelphia as it was this year, what they had on that roster. A friend of mine, a guy I work with, Maurice Jones-Drew, said it might have been the best roster he'd seen in the NFL in the last 20 years in terms of all the depth and the talent they had. But ultimately, as we said, they're losing a lot of people, and they got to figure out what to do with about 20 different guys on that roster, from Jason Kelsey to James Bradberry, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox. I mean, they've got guys up and down the roster, from guys who are going to be free to guys who are avoiding. And so, yeah, it will be interesting to see how they manage that part of it. But, I think the bigger losses are the coordinators. You're talking about losing Shane Steichen, who I think did a brilliant job of managing that offense the last 2 years. Nick Sirianni gave him play calling duties last season, and he managed the top ranked rushing offense in the NFL, and he turned Jalen Hurts into an MVP this year. And then you're talking about Jonathan Gannon, who is a pretty talented defensive coordinator, moving on to Arizona. That's a lot of change in your building. And just look at the Buffalo Bills, see what happened when they lost Brian Daboll, like how that affected their offense. We'll see what happens with the Niners when they lose to Miko Ryans. I mean, those are very smart, bright, successful coaches. So I think Jalen Hurts has proven himself to be a pretty talented quarterback. I think Nick Sirianni has proven himself to be a pretty good head coach. But again, they are playing a different kind of game than what the Chiefs have been playing, and they got to find a way to rebuild that roster in some places that are going to be hard to rebuild.
Eric, what do you think? A huge free agent list. If you look at what all they've got to handle, Miles Sanders, Jason Kelsey, two of their interior offensive linemen, Brandon Garb, Fletcher Cox, linebacker, safety, corner. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done on the personnel side. Not to mention the two coordinators. I mean, is this team a one-hit wonder?
Well, not to mention the fact that they have to give the quarterback a deal, right? And the way that Hurts is being paid right now, it's not like a first round pick, right? Where his new contract is going to cost money next year, right? When the signing bonus comes up and they prorate it out and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, that was why last week you guys, I think maybe you guys were probably fine about it, but I had a few people when I said like this game means more to the Eagles than it does the Chiefs, this is kind of what I meant, right? Like where if you don't win this one, you have a lot of difficulties moving on from this. And that's the case, right? And this is also why, everybody talks about the Super Bowl hangover. And in fact, we haven't got it as much of late with the Chiefs and Bengals, with the Super Bowl loser, but like, that's what happens, right? Like, generally speaking, the team, as you said eloquently last week, Petro, the team that loses the Super Bowl is generally the team with the worst quarterback. And the team that makes the Super Bowl with the worst quarterback has a great roster. And it's just hard in the NFL to keep a roster together for that long. And that's what we're seeing here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think it's they can get a lot of the guys back in the mix. The cap situation is kind of difficult because they've got all these voidable contracts, right? Like that's part of what's there. So some of them they can like just hang on to, and I expect them to be spending a lot of time trying to rework them. But there's no doubt, like this one Tina talking about. I wonder if Jason Kelsey retires. A lot of people think he is going to retire. That's a big hole. Wait, let's just start with their best play, the rugby scrum. I mean, it starts. He's the tip of the spear on that, and it makes him unstoppable in that short yardage situation. I mean, and the two coordinators, I mean, this is pretty quick for Nick Sirianni to have to figure this out, right? We've seen Andy Reid and Bill Belichick turn over those spots. Bill Belichick actually not turning it over very well this past year, right? As he had Matt Patricia, even a veteran guy, did a bad job of handling his coordinators. Andy Reid's done a pretty good job of always having kind of that next guy up, grooming the next coordinator to be in there, but I mean, this is the trick. It's one thing, whether it's college or pro, Jeff, it's one thing to have it all figured out and spot your guys when you're on the way up. When you're on the way up, you're on the ground floor. You're at the combine. You're out with all the guys. You're finding out who the hot assistant coaches are. When you're the head coach, you're kind of isolated from those guys, and it gets harder to identify who the hot young position coach is that's going to be a great coordinator. And Nick Sirianni's pretty new at this job, only 2 years in, and he wasn't the most experienced guy to get the job, and now he's got to do that with not one but two coordinators. That's a lot.
Yeah, and I think the word is that Brian Johnson, their quarterbacks coach, is going to be the offensive coordinator now, and he played a big part in Jalen Hurts' development as well. I mean, a guy who's had a lot of history dealing with dual threat quarterbacks, and he helped Hurts grow. But again, going back to Buffalo, you saw what happened with Ken Dorsey, took over Brian Daboll there, and it was a good start. But then as the season went on, there were people complaining about some of the stuff he was doing, and the offense got kind of stale down the stretch there. And so that's a big question. And I know that Sirianni, the timing of this with Gannon wasn't great because they went so deep into the playoffs. I was told that he had his eye on Vic Fangio, and Vic Fangio was in the building at some point doing some analyst stuff for them before they played the Chiefs. I think Sirianni expected Gannon to go and was hoping to be able to slide Fangio into that role as defensive coordinator, and Fangio obviously went down to the Dolphins, took that gig. So yeah, it's not easy, but I also look at guys like Sean McVay and see what he's been able to do. I mean, again, when you get around some of these younger guys, it's a whole different vibe than what you see around Andy with his staff, much older group. You've got some young guys who've been mixed in there, like Mike Kafka back in the day, but largely what Sirianni had around him, and I was with him earlier this year, just a lot of really smart young guys, really ambitious young guys. So I think he's got an eye for that. The question is whether those guys actually can do the job at a high level.
Yeah, agreed. And we're going to find out, but that is a lot of change. The one thing we know that they've got, Eric, is a quarterback, right? Like I think we all came away impressed with what we saw out of Jalen Hurts. Right now, he's not expensive. It's time to extend him though, and you get a couple more years where the guy's not expensive under that scenario. But is he the guy that deserves one of those? I'll use an NBA term, max contracts at the quarterback position.
No, but but I say that with trepidation, right? Because yeah, I guess was Kyler Murray worth it after he took the Cardinals to the playoffs last year? It it's just really hard. I think that the optimistic view is that Jalen Hurts has literally gotten better every year of his career that we've seen him, right? Alabama year 1, Alabama year 2, Oklahoma, Alabama year 3, he sat on the bench, but then Oklahoma, he got better. Year 1 for Philly, he got better. Year 2 for Philly, he got better. And he obviously got better this year. So, if he continues to improve, he might end up being worth it. But it's just so hard to win in the NFL when a quarterback makes that kind of money. And I think there are only maybe 3 or 4 guys that are able to win consistently making that much money. And that's the harsh reality. If they brought him back at 35 million, I think that made a lot of sense. But it sounds like it's going to be 45 to 50, and that's it's tough. It's really tough. And they're going to do it. I just think it's going to be another lesson for a team to learn.
Yeah. Why is this different than Kyler Murray? Tina said Kyler Murray imploded, right? Like they gave him the money and it didn't work out.
Murray had some elements to him that are different. Yeah. I think Hurts. I mean, Hurts. This is why it pains me to say what I just said. Right? I did not say it. Hurts, as we talked about last time. He thinks through things. He's a very progressive guy. He's got he clearly has a good head on his shoulders. I mean, you think about after the game, all the stuff he said, he gets it, right? Jalen Hurts gets it, but it's still hard to win with a quarterback making that much money. It just is. It's and if the defense is 10 spots worse, what happens to Hurts? If they have to let Devontae Smith go, what happens to Hurts? All those things are a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of people talking here. Tina, Hurts has the maturity. He does look much more mature than what was it? Call of Duty. That's the problem for Kyler Murray. Apparently, spends too much time as a better first-person shooter than he is quarterback. I guess. Listen, I do get it. I mean, I do think he's got the makeup. I mean, there was that great cut of him actually being the adult in the room with Nick Sirianni when Sirianni was taunting the Chiefs defense after the whole Dallas Goedert play. Everyone thought it was going to be good. It wasn't. And so both teams were moving up and down the field based on what they thought their instant replay was going to say. And Sirianni was waving him back, and it was Hurts who reached up and said, "Don't do that." He is the adult in the room. So you're going to get a guy who's prepared, ready to go, ready to work. I mean, Jeff, the alternative of life without Jalen Hurts, that's not going to be explored.
No, it's not going to be explored. And again, I've said this for the last couple of months. There's a lot of the intangibles that Patrick Mahomes brings to the Chiefs, Jalen Hurts brings to that team. And so it would not surprise me, even though you're going to hear a lot of talk about what he wants, what he could get paid. It would not surprise me if he took a similar deal to what Mahomes took with the Chiefs. Because I think, one, he was there when Carson Wentz was going through what he went through. And so he understands how that can look when you're making that kind of money and how it can affect your roster when you're not able to be as flexible as far as making moves. Two, he's got a lot of friends on that team. Guys, not only guys he played with, but guys he grew up playing with and against, like A.J. Brown, like Devontae Smith. And so to be in a position where you might lose some of those guys because of your contract, I think that's going to weigh on him as well. And I think he wants to win. I think that, to me, that's the most important thing to him. I think he understands, just as Patrick does with the endorsement part of it. Like he's a good-looking guy. He's very smart. He's very affable. He's going to make money in endorsements. So I don't think he's going to be like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray in the sense of taking this hard stance, give me the big check and let's see what happens. I think he's going to be a lot more. I think someone said it a second ago. He's very thoughtful. And I think he understands he's in a really good situation, that for that situation to continue and to get back to these kind of games, which is ultimately how you're defined as a quarterback, he needs to be very smart about how he handles his big deal.
Well, the Eagles are a smart franchise, right? I mean, they're, you think about the Mahomes deal and the rolling guarantees and the spreading out the money over a lot of different years. Like, I feel like the Eagles will do something that'll help them in that regard and not make it like a Deshaun Watson deal or what Lamar wants for his deal, what Murray had. Murray's deal is actually weird, right? Like almost the worst case scenario because he's cheap this year still, and then next year is when the pile on happens. And like, so that, this was supposed to be the year to add to help Murray, and he's hurt, so then, whereas I think with Hurts, the Eagles will get creative. They're not stupid. And so I think that there's a way, but like I said this on Twitter, I said, somebody asked, like, do you ever think this is going to change? And I'm like, the Chiefs have the best quarterback on the planet, the best head coach on the planet, a GM who made all the right moves and beat the Eagles by 3 in the Super Bowl. Like the margins are thin as hell when you pay the quarterback that much money.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult. And I do think this one's interesting, though, from Quinn. Jalen Hurts should be talked about over Josh Allen every day. He's gone further. Like, if everything is going to be measured on winning championships, then doesn't the fact that Jalen Hurts has gone further?
There is no Patrick Mahomes in the NFC. Well, like we
don't. I mean, how are we judging
Josh,
it?
Man, like there's no Joe Burrow in the NFC right now.
So you would take Josh Allen and Joe Burrow over Jalen Hurts?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Hurts is definitely 4 right now. I mean, but if you're talking about
I would take Herbert over Hurts.
Yeah. I'd go that far too. I mean, I think that's the top 5 right there. I think we can all agree where Aaron Rodgers is at if you exclude him, where he's at in his career. Those are the 5 best quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence is probably in the mix too. But yeah, I mean, it's like Josh Allen is a freak of nature. He's just
both
like Patrick
Allen
Mahomes.
and Herbert were injured for most of this year as well. And I think so was Hurts at the end. But like
but that's part of the equation. Like, why is Allen not going to be hurt?
Well,
you think they're going to quit running him?
Yeah.
And when
he's
don't
not
run
going
him,
to be as hurt next year in all likelihood as he was this year.
Well, listen, when there's a reason why they run guys, because they can't just drop back and spin it. You need to take one of the defenders.
No, that's it's a whole different game now. That's not a liability. That's more of an advantage when you can move like those guys can now.
I'll object to that. I will disagree. Anyone who's sitting there, maybe a team. I'll back off and say Buffalo, who's never won a Super Bowl, maybe. But not with the Philadelphia Eagles. They won one 10 minutes ago, so they don't have to like validate. Now it wasn't Nick Sirianni, so that's he's still trying to prove himself to be a championship coach. But the organization on a mission, all in. Rams trying to capture Los Angeles. Bills never won a Super Bowl. Chiefs hadn't won in 50 years. Listen, if the guy can spin it, Andy Reid will not quarterback sneak Patrick Mahomes. Why is that?
But that's a choice he's made. I mean, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. I mean, I think that I hear what you're saying, but Mahomes has been hurt too. I mean, I think ultimately all these guys, they play in a way that puts themselves in position to get hurt. But I think everybody we just named is a very good passer.
Mahomes gets hurt, yes, because he holds onto the ball forever, and they need to coach that out of him. They need him to start thinking less about making every play and make most of the plays so that he's around to keep playing. That's the transition that Patrick Mahomes has to make. But I will disagree. When Josh Allen drops back and throws, I have not been drinking. It's iced tea tonight, by the way. He's not that good, right? Like he's had one hot game against the Chiefs in a divisional game.
Yeah.
Where is it? Like, why? I don't understand. Why is Justin Herbert? Why is he like no good? Because he doesn't win. He doesn't get to the playoffs. We're going to judge him on his record, but then the fact that Josh Allen can't sniff a Super Bowl, that doesn't count.
My brother in Christ. Look at we gotta take a step back.
Yeah.
Josh Allen is 10-6, 13-3, 11-6, and 13-3. Herbert is 9-8 and 10-7. Like there are levels here. The Josh Allen has won a playoff game every single year since 2020. Herbert got hawked from behind by Trevor Lawrence in this last. There are levels. Josh Allen, I mean, look, Josh Allen, you're talking about 7.6 yards per pass attempt in the Buffalo Cold. He led the league this year in approximate value by Pro Football Reference. 35 touchdowns, 14. Like, he has 37, 36, 35 touchdowns through the air the last 3 years. And, on the ground, you're talking about 8 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. Josh Allen is a freaking good quarterback. I put him at third.
What about what Big One says? So he's Alex Smith?
Alex Smith never had numbers like
Jeff,
that.
you got to take this one.
I don't understand people bashing Josh Allen. I mean, I think it's –
Well, I don't understand why why the scale is used for one way on one guy, but not on another.
Well, you have to talk to Eric about it.
Because they're different.
Yeah.
Oh, because you like one and don't like the other. So you bury Herbert in sport, but Josh Allen, hey, Josh Allen better than Herbert? Yes. Josh Allen more productive than Herbert? Yes. Josh Allen more productive than Jalen Hurts? No. Josh Allen more gone further in the playoffs than Jalen Hurts? No. He has not been to the Super Bowl. He did not have the best quarterback in generations on the ropes in the Super Bowl.
Oh, he had him on the ropes in the playoffs.
Josh Allen had the best quarterback in a generation on the ropes in the AFC divisional round last year. What are we talking about?
I mean, I think winning should count, and it seems to count only in certain points. Right, let's move on. JuJu tweets Bradberry, Jeff. You like that? You have a problem with it? Is it just good, clean fun, or is it a bigger issue?
I thought it was a bad look. Normally people talking don't really, especially before games, doesn't really matter. And certainly the Chiefs have the right to say whatever they want to after they've won. But I just thought it was unnecessary. It just seemed like it was just tacky at a time when, look, they've won the championship. He's had a solid year, and I don't know. I will say this: it does seem like people, after they play the Eagles, are very quick to want to talk trash on the Eagles. So I don't know if they're a team that is very petty during the games or talking a lot during the games, and this is their chance to come back at them. But I just thought, dude, you won a championship, you're celebrating. Like, why even go at him like that? I thought Bradberry was very. I thought he handled it very respectfully. Like, he could have bitched and moaned about it and made a whole bunch of noise, and he said, "I did it." They called it. I thought he handled it very well. So I think that juxtaposed to that tweet, it didn't look good.
Eric, what do you think about the move by JuJu Smith-Schuster to put that tweet out there?
It seemed kind of dumb. You get, the flags fly forever and you can do whatever you want, but I agree with Jeff. I mean, the whole Eagles team conducted themselves with a plan. I think the coach pisses people off, right? Like, he's got that Italian, the swagger and everything that kind of, and I think that makes Julian Love, what the heck? I mean, Julian Love just picks a fight with a guy for no reason, and then Debo called James Bradberry trash, and then Ayuk said, "I put every dollar I own on the Chiefs," and so I agree with Jeff. There must be something that's said during these games that rubs people the wrong way, but publicly, all the players said all the right things. Bradberry's I held the guy. I wish they didn't call it. And Jalen Hurts, of course, was his post-game press conference was about as positive.
No.
It reflected on him as positively as it could. Smith-Schuster is kind of a social media guy. He got him in trouble in Pittsburgh. He's coming up for a new contract. You wonder if, the thing that was interesting was coming off that Bengals game where the Bengals talked a lot of mess and the Chiefs beat them, and both teams had a lot of respect for each other going into that game. Where you could tell they didn't want to get it. The Eagles didn't want to mess with the Chiefs. The Chiefs didn't want to mess with either the Bengals or the Eagles. And those, you wonder if that affects JuJu's future there, because I thought it was ill-advised for him to do. Bradberry wasn't Bradberry handled it very classy, and I just thought it was kind of bad.
Yeah, I agree, and I think JuJu had a nice season, right? He played most of the year. He produced 933 yards. He proved he could be a part of an offense. He proved he could be just a good teammate. He didn't have any kind of social media, snafus like he'd had in Pittsburgh. It looked like, okay, this guy's grown up and he appreciates what he's got. And I don't think it'll really scare the Chiefs off. I think Andy Reid will, have his grandfatherly, don't do that again, son, conversation with guys that he's done before and had success with. But I think it burns his market outside. Who needs 933 yards? A good player who's a good teammate, and you want to have, but it's not worth,
Well, you saw what AJ Brown said.
Well,
AJ Brown said your ass was out of the league without Mahomes.
Yeah.
And
you sign in a $3 million deal plus incentives. Now you hit many of those incentives, but I mean, you're not good enough to be an asshole. Buddy Bell yelled at in a Royals clubhouse once at Renalvis Hernandez when he had to be pried off him from beating his ass. And he said, "You're not good enough to be an asshole." And that phrase has stuck with me forever. It's one of the true things in sports. You're really good. You can be that guy, but he's not that good. And he went from being a guy that you're like, yeah, we're a rebuilding team. We need a veteran presence and we'll draft a guy. And this guy will kind of be the steady, move the chains guy to like, do we want to mess with this? Is this what we need?
It's kind of Orlando Brown Jr. like, right?
What?
It's kind of Orlando Brown Jr. like. You play nice the first year, then all season rolls around. All of a sudden, okay, this is what we're getting.
Yeah.
Now I see what this guy really is about.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it was important. And I liked how AJ Brown handled it. He had his teammates back and he said, listen, that guy was nothing but good to you at the end. He said, hey, I had it. And I'll tell you what AJ Brown was thinking, BS, like we worse than that has not been called. And yet here this guy is standing up saying, yeah, I did it. It was not a good look at all for JuJu Smith-Schuster. Derek Carr, where should he land, Jeff? Like what's the next step? He's finally out from the Raiders.
Jeff's response is exactly how you should talk about Derek Carr. Who gives a flying?
I mean, it to me, it's the most. It will be probably one of the more bizarre quarterback movement courtships in a while, because I keep saying it. The place that makes the most sense is with the Jets, because they have a team that, even though Eric's not as bullish on them as I am, I think that's the best option. The Colts make sense. He's been in New Orleans. I just think given the way he's wired, I don't know if he's built to be in a really big market with a lot of scrutiny on him. And so I keep going back to Indianapolis probably makes sense. New Orleans doesn't make any kind of sense because they really are up against it salary cap wise. And Carolina really makes even less sense because they're not as good as those teams I just mentioned. And so I think if you put a gun to my head, I would say he's playing football for the Colts next year.
Okay. Eric, you got a landing spot?
I can't see the Colts or the Panthers for the same reason, right? Because Ballard almost lost his job over all these like bridge quarterback guys. Frank Reich lost his job over all the bridge quarterback guys. Both teams are in the top 10 in terms of draft pick. In a quarterback class, I think at least 3 guys will go in the top 10. The Jets do make the most sense. The Jets, though, I mean,
I'll put Washington out there too. Washington could be interesting.
Yeah, I think what the issue, Washington could be, and that would be an attractive spot. Like, I actually think he could have success with McLaurin, Jahan Dotson after a good rookie year, Samuel, good running backs, good offensive line. So that one's a good one. I think they want to go with Sam Howell. They've been telling offensive coordinator candidates they want Sam Howell, and that includes Bieniemy. But that's a good one as well. The Jets make too much sense. It's just going to be disappointing, right? He's just going to go there. Belichick's going to show him the 50 states a few times a year again, and it's just going to be disappointing.
There's no more options after that. That's what makes it so weird. There's no place else he can go.
Yeah, but he was trash this year. Like he had a great game against the Chiefs, and then but like you have a shot to kind of get back into the playoff race against the Rams, and you lay an egg. Like that team in the second half of games was almost as bad as the Chargers as far as scoring points. And they gave him Devontae Adams. Darren Waller's the highest paid tight end in football. Josh Jacobs had a career year like a lead the NFL in rushing year and you still suck. Like, and that's what Josh McDaniel, who people thought was going to be an upgrade over John Gruden.
Alex Smith was 29 years old when he got to the Kansas City Chiefs. He played 7 years, not 9. But Alex Smith at that point in his career had thrown for 81 touchdowns and 63 interceptions. And you'd be like, well, he was in San Francisco before he got Harbaugh. Who do you have? Well, what traveling circus have we been watching in Las Vegas or around the Raiders for head coaches for Derek Carr? Derek Carr has 217 touchdowns and 99 interceptions in 2 more seasons. I get it. He doesn't stand in against the rush like everybody wants, but don't tell me he can't be. And somebody put that up there, said, can he be like the Alex Smith for somebody? And I think that's what you do, right? You can be team's Alex Smith, right? Okay, quarterback until you find the one you love in the draft. Like, I don't understand why the Andy Reid, script of get better at quarterback every time you can wouldn't apply to Derek Carr for half the teams in this league.
Because the problem is when you actually, like, Alex Smith was different, right? Because Alex Smith, was tough. Derek Carr's not, okay? Effective. Like, Derek Carr is not Derek Carr does not inspire an NFL team the way that Alex Smith does. And secondly, there is no way that if you draft a real quarterback at pick 10, does Derek Carr help that guy on the journey to being a starter? Derek Carr straight up left his team the moment he got benched this past year. It is different. And I think that and again, I'm an analytics guy, I'm a math guy, so like this is a little sacrilege for me, but there's a difference between Derek Carr and a guy like Alex Smith. I'll just say that.
A little bit sacrilege. That's a new one for me. I don't know about you. Why can't he play the role of Alex Smith, Jeff?
Well, I think we put those numbers out there. I had a personnel guy back during the season if you compare his numbers to Matthew Stafford at this point in Matthew Stafford's career, the numbers, he actually has better numbers than Stafford did at this point in his career. So I would say he could actually be a Matthew Stafford for somebody. I think we underestimate how much dysfunction has been around him as far as the coaching he's gotten. I know Josh McDaniels is supposed to be this quarterback whisperer. I know that John Gruden's supposed to be that guy, but I don't think he's ever really been with a guy he could trust. I can't even remember who was there before those guys, back when Del Rio was the head coach. And so I think he needs to get with somebody who he can trust and who can make him a better quarterback. Be honest with you, like if Sean Payton was around him, I'd be more optimistic about where he would go. That's one reason why I think the Colts are interesting, because I think Shane Steichen has proven to be pretty versatile in dealing with different kind of quarterbacks. He had Phillip Rivers in San Diego. He had Jalen Hurts. He's been around different types of, with the Colts.
Herbert.
Herbert. And so I think he's got the best chance of working with him of all the teams that are out there that we're talking about looking for quarterbacks.
The 2D podcast is proudly brought to you by Gannon Asphalt and Concrete. Gannon Asphalt and Concrete now hiring all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based upon your experience, paid time off, insurance, just some of the benefits that are there as part of the benefits package. You can check them out at GannAsphalt.com for more info. And if your business, any kind of business, has any kind of problem with a parking lot, Gann serves the entire Kansas City metro area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Aaron Rodgers, is it finally over? The nation's long nightmare, at least Green Bay's long nightmare, Jeff, is that finally over with Aaron Rodgers?
I mean, if they can make the numbers work, the Jets obviously have already inquired and have shown interest. They want to make a move. So we talked about with Derek Carr a second ago, that is the most likely place for him to go. The problem is when you start talking about a move for him, you're talking about starting with that deal that Denver gave up to get Russell Wilson and paying him a king's ransom to be your quarterback. And so you start talking about parting with pieces. You start talking about the kind of salary he's going to command. You start talking about the Pat McAfee stuff and the darkness retreats and everything else. And this, I think before you make that move, you better know he is very serious about winning championships, because the last time he spoke publicly about this, as far as wanting to keep playing, it was about winning MVPs. It was about playing at a higher level. And so, but I think that he's given, I think this had happened, if they had come off a losing season the year he started going public about his discontent, and they had not made this deal yet, I think he'd be gone by now. He gave them tremendous cover. Now you have a fan base who's a little bit tired of him. He's getting wackier every time he gets in front of a microphone. I think that this is their opportunity to get out of this deal and move forward. And so whatever it takes to do that, and knowing you can get some pieces back in return, even if they're going to have to pay something, when he goes, they're going to pay a price for it because of the salary cap implications. But again, I think that they can't wait to get rid of him.
Yeah. I think they finally have said, look, we've gone as far as we can go with him. Once the first time he didn't take him to the playoffs, you're like, we can lose without you. Right? Like that's a phrase that a lot of general managers say a lot. Like if you want to hold out and how valuable are and you're already losing, you might as well punt the guy, take the picks, and go get somebody who wants to be a part of the program you got, right, Eric? I mean, that's the knock. But there's always the beauty of it is if you're the team that's looking to move the guy, there's always somebody who feels like this is my last chance to save my job. I got to swing for this one.
I mean, he's not Green Bay anymore, right? Green Bay, and look, Green Bay will put up with riffraff.
I don't know. It's pretty dark this time of year in Green Bay. Short days. You're from up that way. Like he's kind of very Green Bay in that way.
But Favre is like Favre was, gee golly shucks, I'm going to go to Economawalk with Tauscher and drink some Schlitz and all this kind of stuff. Aaron Rodgers is every bit as weird and like just an idiot, right? Did we see him on Pat McAfee where he's like, I respect Schefter and Rappaport, but they don't have anybody in my inner circle. It's like, no crap. Your inner circle probably sucks. If you had a real friend to tell you to shut the hell up and stop talking about darkness retreats and all this stuff and to just get a grip and not say like, oh, I'm going to, as long as we're not mathematically eliminated, I'll play. Or I could win another MVP. If you had a real friend, they take you out of that freaking room and he's not Green Bay anymore. He's they don't want to put up with that nonsense anymore. So yeah, he's going to go somewhere and he's going to flop because he's got the talent. But you saw him, like my guy cleansed out every last like muscle he had in his body the last couple off seasons. He looked frail, he looked weak, he looked slow, and there's a little glimpse in there every once in a while. But look, you had a chance to beat, and I love the Lions, but you had a chance to beat the Detroit Lions at home to make a bad NFC playoff picture, and you couldn't. And he's dusted at this point. And the fact he doesn't have people in his corner to tell him to quit while you're behind, but not as far behind as you're going to be after you go to New York and look worse than Tim Tebow did there. I don't know. I'm bored with this guy.
I'm going to limit this to no more than 90 seconds. I'm 90% sure Eric is just being trolled. But for those that don't know, I'm going to put up Aaron's comment here. He's an idiot. You see all those big books behind him at his house during his appearances on Pat's show? Sorry, he's not an idiot. You see all those big books?
Yeah, that's what I want to see behind my quarterback's picture. A book, like a copy of Ayn Rand. That's what I want to see. Real intellectual, really bright bulb we got there at the quarterback spot.
Doesn't Patrick Mahomes have those same books on his shelf? I mean, isn't that isn't Patrick Mahomes on a streaming talk show?
Hey, I actually texted this. I texted this to one of my friends. I go, you know what? Did you think Pat told his brother and his wife, you can party all you want once I win a Super Bowl? We didn't see those two all year.
Shut it down.
Like that's a quarterback, right? That thing was getting out of control. Remember last year how much time we talked about his brother and his mom and his girlfriend and his wife and all this, and like one and the same, I think. But like that wasn't a thing this year. Mahomes Aaron Rodgers let this problem spiral out of control for 2 years, right? I don't want to get a vaccine. I'm immunized. All this kind of stuff. And that was the top of it. That was when Aaron Rodgers merely looked kooky. Now he looks like a freaking idiot. And at the same time, we're talking about Mahomes at this time last year. We're like, is he going to get it together? His wife wants him to buy all these houses, blah, blah. And the guy that's a quarterback. Pat's a real quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is just a poser at this point.
Yeah. All right. I like it. Yeah, I think he's done in Green Bay. I think it's going to be really tricky how they get out from under it because they're going to have to rework the deal, then take a hit, prorated after June 1. It's going to be pretty sticky, but that speaks to how much Green Bay wants him out. I mean, all indications are now that they're going to do it, and it's going to be costly to get it done, but they don't care, right? It's like that chick, like you're like, hey, whatever it takes, man. I will move you to the other side of the country, pay for it, do whatever it takes, man.
I think it's like that movie where the guy, James Franco, and he's trapped in a cave somewhere in Utah, and he has to cut his arm off to get out. I think that's more. I'm cutting it off.
I don't care. I'm leaving it behind. We got to go. And you ain't coming with me. All right. How about Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator in Baltimore? What does this mean for the Lamar Jackson saga? Jeff?
I think it's intriguing. To me, it's a weird move to get a college coordinator who doesn't really who hasn't really handled quarterbacks like this. I know they run a lot of design stuff with the quarterback that Stetson Bennett. I know he revitalized that offense, at least energized it, took it from being more, kind of pro style, conservative, 3 yards in a cloud of dust almost, to being a lot more diversified. But I still think, I don't know how this works with Lamar Jackson. And it almost makes me think they're thinking about life without Lamar Jackson at some point. Because he's been pushed as a passing game guy, but I think this is more complex than that.
Yeah, I think so. But are you telling me you weren't wowed by his work as the OC of the Bucs from 16 to 18, or his 1 year Browns 19?
Don't remember
that didn't blow you away?
Yeah, the Lovie Smith years.
We forget, like, I'm actually being serious. Like the 18 year with the Bucs, that was the Fitzmagic. Like the first month when Winston was suspended and Fitzmagic was throwing touchdowns all over the place.
And that was Fitzmagic.
New Orleans on opening day, scored like 40 against New Orleans. What's that?
Pocket pass.
Yeah, they beat the Eagles at home with Fitzmagic. Like, I think he's got something going for him. I think
Wait, hang on. Before this will just take a second, because I don't want to lay that as a foundation and then build on it. 38 teams, and I'm the biggest Fitzmagic fan you're ever going to find. You'll recall I was the guy that said you can get 90% of Alex Smith for 25% of the price or 10% of the price by signing the guy. So I'm the biggest proponent, but he had a hot game for 9 different teams and 9 different coordinators. And he had piss games for all those teams too. Like, you can't quote a couple of games that won you a couple of bucks on a bet or won your fantasy league and say, oh, look, Monken can really do it.
No. Back it up. In 2018, Ryan Fitzpatrick started 7 games for the Bucs. He averaged 9.6 yards per pass attempt, which not only qualified for the league lead, it also led the league. He averaged 9.6 yards per pass attempt the 1 year that Todd Monken was his offensive coordinator. And you go to, Jameis, who started the other 9 games that year. Jameis averaged, 7.9 yards per pass attempt, which is also damn good.
He also went 2-5. He also went 2-5 because he was playing catch up because he was. Listen, I love Fitzpatrick, but come on, like this is. How about this one? Ryan Fitzpatrick, Lamar Jackson. You're right, duplicates, same guy.
But what I mean is, like, being able to orchestrate a downfield passing game is what the Ravens have needed for 4 years.
But how does that mesh with Lamar Jackson's skill set? I think that's the bigger issue.
But
right?
Lamar's a downfield. Lamar can't operate in the intermediate passing game as much as more accurate quarterbacks. He's like Cam, where like Cam was much better going down the field. That was why, like, the original Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Ted Ginn, when Ted Ginn was running down the field and dropping balls, hitting them in the face and stuff, they were still an effective offense because Cam would go downfield and he was effective like that. Like, Lamar Jackson is not a good enough passer to be throwing in the intermediate. He needs to be throwing downfield. And Monken, who Deshaun Jackson for that team he averaged 19 yards a catch. They had Mike Evans average 17 yards a catch that year that Monken was the coordinator. That is how you win in the passing game with Lamar Jackson. I'm intrigued. I think it's a good pickup.
That's how you win. They just didn't win with him that year.
Yeah.
They played winning football in the passing game. They averaged 8.6 yards per passing time. That's freaking good.
Selective wins and losses, selective use of the wins and loss statistic is what I hear there. I don't know. I mean,
that Bucs team gave up 29 points per game. That's why they lost.
And maybe we'll, for me, this is a little bit like, do you think that this is, they already know Eric Bieniemy is going to land in Washington, and so this is where they went? Is Monken actually a better, more attractive candidate than Eric Bieniemy is to be your off? We're not talking head coach now. We're just talking offensive coordinator. Is he actually a more attractive candidate than Eric Bieniemy right now, Jeff?
I would think not for the same position. No. But
both guys were talked about for that job, and they're making this hire first. Again, I kind of think Bieniemy's going to Washington, and maybe that's been a done deal for a little bit.
They've been waiting so long. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Eric's a lot more optimistic than I am, and I say this just because I am not sold on Lamar Jackson playing in any system and having success that doesn't require him to use his legs in the same. If he could be Jalen Hurts, if he can make that kind of leap as a passer, I would be more excited about this. I just don't think he can do it because he's had 5 years to do it. And Jalen Hurts did it in like a season or did it in like 6 months. And so, I think they were trying to do some of that at the start of the year. You saw him dropping back more in their first few games and trying to be more of a pocket passer and then really kind of selling it, gassing him up in that way. But again, I'm just not. I think it's going to be a long year in Baltimore with this contract and with his offense.
Yeah, I do too. By the way, we're brought to you by our friends at Gannon Asphalt and Concrete. They are hiring. If you're looking right now, great Kansas City company to work for. Starting pay at $30 per hour on based upon your experience, paid time off, insurance, all part of the benefit packages. Is one of Kansas City's fastest growing companies. Gannon Asphalt and Concrete now hiring. Find out more at GannonAsphalt.com. We'll get to Eric Bieniemy. I want to save him for last to talk about where his total position right now. But did the Colts get it right with Shane Steichen? Eric, are you excited about Shane Steichen, Jim Irsay, and Chris Ballard all getting together and figuring out Twitter?
Shane Steichen so I've heard two things. I've heard that Steichen is a little bit of a kind of a calculated professor kind of guy, which is kind of hurt him in some other interviews. But the other part of the equation is how good he's been in a number of different roles. Like he had Justin Herbert, rookie of the year kind of stuff on Anthony Lynn's staff. He had Jalen Hurts, who we just saw and we talked about earlier, the evolution there. When he got fired from Anthony Lynn's staff, he went to the Eagles and he was going to be one of those offensive coordinators that didn't call plays, right? Because Sirianni was one of those in Indy and he wanted to show his chops. When they struggled early last year, 2021, Steichen took over the play calling, and that offense changed his identity to a run-first quarterback run. So we've seen him have success as a kind of a Justin Herbert type offense where the quarterback's arm is the main focus, and he's been successful in a Jalen Hurts type offense where the quarterback's legs are a focus. I like the pick. I think, especially they're picking fourth. They're gonna, in all likelihood, get some pick of Bryce Young, Will Levis, or CJ Stroud. They have an okay roster, not a great roster anymore, but they do have some good players. I like it. I'm really optimistic about this one.
Is CJ Stroud the pick, Jeff, to go with this to try to recreate the Jalen Hurts scenario? Jonathan Taylor, Jalen Hurts type of combination? Is that how this all fits together? They think they've got their combination in place and they can have rolling what they had rolling in Philadelphia?
It's possible. And like Eric said, the Colts need somebody who can be very flexible with their offense, because as much as we talk about their roster and what they've had, especially in the offensive line, like they've had a lot of underperforming talent, overpaid talent on their offensive line. Obviously, the running back was beat up. They've had a weird mix of receivers. And Steichen has proven that he's one of these coordinators, one of these coaches who understands it's really smart to play to the strengths of what you have. He's not going to come in there with he's going to have some ideas, some schemes that he wants to run, but he's going to look at what they can do well, and he's going to play to that. And so I think that is what gives him an opportunity, whether it's a veteran like Derek Carr, whether it's a guy like TJ Stroud coming in. I think he's going to be somebody who's going to energize the place because he's a smart guy, he's a flexible guy, and he's going to make the most of what he has to work with.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Like, how much does the owner have his fingerprints on where they're going to go personnel-wise? What's Chris Ballard's role? That was a spooky press conference, was it not, Eric, to see that dynamic there at play? And, I mean, Jim Irsay, joking around about Twitter and Chris Ballard, like that's – if you're Shane Steichen, wow, okay. It's going to be an interesting – day at the office. Every day I go to the office.
Yeah, it's really out of character for Jim Irsay to be weird.
You can be that when you're rich.
Yeah. You call it eccentric when you're rich.
What do we call it?
That's right.
It's eccentric. Is it is that what we're calling him?
Yeah, but do you like? I mean, listen. This is one that does it strike fear in the hearts of Jacksonville, who's now the team to beat Tennessee? Are they now worried about the combination that they have up there in Indianapolis?
No, but I think it gets them. I think it gets them on the green, right? Like with a young quarterback and like you said, the offensive line has to play better than they played in the past few years. But Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, of course. On the other side, you have DeForest Buckner, although I don't know if he'll be back. Bobby Okereke. You have some players on that team, but no, I mean this is going to be an underdog for a while. It's going to be very similar, it's a rebuilding team. But I think starting with Steichen, I think it's a good spot. As good of a spot as you can be in with Irsay as your owner. Remember, Irsay was the owner when Reich took over the team and did pretty solidly at the beginning until Andrew Luck retired.
How about Jonathan Gannon to Arizona, Jeff? Is this a good fit? I mean, getting a defensive guy to come in and coach and try to fix what's going on with the quarterback with Murray there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit strange. It's strange because they had a defensive guy that they liked, right? Vance Joseph. So if you go that way, to bring somebody else from the building to run the defense is a little bit of a surprise. But I like Gannon. There are people in Philadelphia that will tell you that they will knock him because he wasn't as super creative with his coverages because he had such a great defensive line, and so they feel like, well, he didn't really show a lot of really exotic stuff. Like he wasn't somebody who was going to mystify you. And the Chiefs exposed that. Obviously, when they weren't getting sacks, they couldn't get stops, in the back end. So that's the only thing I'll say about him that's a negative. But again, he's a pretty bright guy. He's a guy who's on the rise. And that, as much as we'll talk about Kyler Murray, you're probably better off having a defensive-minded coach with that kind of quarterback. We've had this conversation before about offensive-minded guys versus defensive-minded guys. I think when you get those kinds of dual-threat guys, you have to really harness them in a way you don't with someone like a Mahomes or a Joe Burrow. They're better with those kinds of offensive guys because I think you just need somebody that's, hey, look, do this. We'll play off you. We can win with defense. We don't need you to be a hero and screw things up. I look at Cam Newton with Ron Rivera as being a perfect example of that. Ron Rivera got the best out of Cam Newton, let him be Cam Newton, but he also knew I got a way to win games with Cam Newton's going sideways. I think that they have to build a team that can win if Kyler Murray, who's going to be hurt next year, if he doesn't grow from where he's at right now, they have to prepare for a way to win if that's the case.
I would love to see a team be bold enough to just actually tank a year, because I don't know that there's ever been a team more ready for it than the Cardinals. Number one, they've got a cheap number on Kyler Murray, and you're stuck with his contract for a long time. He only counts $13 million next year, but he counts like $52 or $55 million the following year. Push all that money forward, right? Like, be a billionaire, for God's sake. Splash it around. Push that money forward. Put 60, 70, 80 million. Cut everything you need to do. Get yourself in a good cap spot and be able to cut Kyler Murray down the road and just take your lumps this year. Like, I don't I thought Bill Belichick would be the guy that when Tom Brady left, he was going to do that he would tank out, play for the draft pick, and actually recognize the math of it all. But even he wouldn't do it. I don't think it's going to happen.
What's Houston been doing? It feels like tanking.
It does, and maybe they are. And maybe we'll see that when they come out the other side. I would tend to think that you wouldn't change coach every year if the coach would be in on the plan, and not the guy who pays for the plan,
not the pastor.
Yeah, exactly. But if you bring a guy in and say, listen, this is what we're going to do. Here's where we, if I were a coach, that would be my presentation to Arizona. Here's what it is. Because do you really want that job? That job sucks.
Yeah.
That job sucks. I mean, I'm sorry.
They don't have any. I mean, they only have one defensive player making over $7 million.
Yeah.
Like, how many of them are any good?
That's what I'm saying. Like, they don't have any good players. They took inside linebacker 2 years in a row in the draft in the first round. I mean, they're a mess.
Yeah.
Like, I would say just a little bit about Gannon. I do think Gannon got a bad rap last year for being like, no disguised coverages, no stunts, nothing like that, no blitzes. They didn't have any talent last year defensively, other than like Slay and like in the back end, they didn't have a ton of talent. You did see once they got Gardner Johnson, Bradberry, Reddick, they got better. Like it was still somewhat vanilla, but they were able to construct a pretty solid defense.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's talk about Eric Bieniemy. What do you think? What does he have to do to be a head coach, Jeff? I mean, this to me is my blueprint if he ends up landing at Washington. I think it's a great spot. I keep hearing I think people are just kidding themselves like, oh, why would you leave Kansas City? I don't think staying in Kansas City is necessarily an option. I think Andy Reid's saying, listen, you're not going to get it from here, so you got to go someplace else. And when I heard John Harbaugh and Ron Rivera, it's like, okay, Andy Reid's guys. He's going to go. He understands, the overall game plan, the overall big picture calendar that Andy Reid has. They probably employ something quite similar. They're both defensive guys. You get to be the guy to, handle the reins. You eliminate that you didn't design it. You're not the play caller. These are both great spots. Either one of them would be a great spot. And you don't have Lamar Jackson. Exactly. If you make Washington a good offense, you're going to be heralded as a stud because they don't have every box checked. This is exactly I think owners are smarter now. They're not just getting the caddies for the Hall of Fame quarterbacks and making them their head coaches like we used to see 20 years ago. Every Super Bowl winning coordinators were immediately hired and often and usually flopped. They're looking for guys that actually have coaching chops. This would prove it if he went to Washington. This is a good plan the way I see it, Jeff.
It is, and I don't have any problem with him moving on and stepping into it, making a lateral move. He has to rebrand himself, and I've said that for the last couple of years. And unfortunately for him, he was hottest in the first couple of years with Mahomes, and he was a guy whose name was out there. But the last couple of years, there's been more hot coordinators, and so the two guys we just discussed with Philadelphia. I mean, boom, you got a job here. Boom, you got a job there. D'Amico Ryans, he was in San Francisco for a minute, has a connection to the Texans. Like, he's going to have to find a way to I don't even think he has a show he can call plays. I just think he has to just be more visible. And he's got to be in a position where he can showcase his personality more. I sometimes, and it kind of drives me a little crazy the way Andy handles it, because he doesn't allow his coaches to do as much talking as other places do. And so, again, when I'm in Philadelphia, it's like, oh, here's Shane Steichen, and here's Jonathan Gannon. You go to Tennessee, very, even though Vrabel's a lot more conservative, like there are guys there you can have access to, or, there's so many teams that you have a chance to just chat with a coach or talk to them or see them on TV talking to people. And I just think once a week for whatever it is, 10 minutes on a Thursday is not enough for Eric Bieniemy to showcase what he can bring to the table. And so, and he's an older guy too. So, it's just, we live in a world now where, young, hip, Sean McVay, Nick Sirianni, owners see that. I want that guy. I want what that guy's bringing. I want people who've been involved with that guy. And as great as Andy's been, I think Eric Bieniemy will benefit from having a lot more opportunity to showcase his personality, which is what ultimately will sell with owners.
Doesn't call plays. There was some talk that maybe he didn't. Somebody had this on here about his chance to put a staff together that maybe he didn't have all the answers in an interview for what a staff would look like. Whatever the knocks are and not the best in interviews. We saw that early on. He's gotten a lot better in front of us in the media. The limited time, Jeff's right. The 9 minutes a week that he has made available. By the way, he will not be spoken to again until about 10 days into Chiefs training camp. Like if he were to stay here, like there's no visibility whatsoever for the guy that's out there, Eric. Is that it? Like how about Stephen A. Smith said it's Andy Reid's fault. Today he said it's Andy Reid's fault that he doesn't have a head coaching job because Andy Reid calls the plays and makes sure everybody knows he calls the play.
They just won the Super Bowl. Who gives it? But here's my issue. Every coach. So who do we just get done talking about? Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen. Those two men have been offensive or defensive coordinators in the NFL for less than or equal to 3 years, right? The expectations for Philadelphia last year were low. Who said that they were going to have the worst record in football in 2021? Me, right? I'm normally not that wrong, right? They go 9-8. 14-3 Super Bowl appearance. Get out, right? Bieniemy, you talk about it. There's another person that I was talking about on the Sumer Sports Show today was Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris won a Super Bowl, and now he's not getting a coach job this cycle. That was his moment, right? When you exceed expectations, you have to get the coach job then because expectations reset. And in the case of Bieniemy, it was even worse, right? Because expectations got reset at a high level, and really all the Chiefs could do is get worse after 2018 because they had an offense that was so great. And so to your point, like he was never going to be able to overcome the issues. But if he goes somewhere like Washington and elevates them to high heights, then it's his moment again, right? Much like, for some of these other guys. So his only path now is to go somewhere else, call plays, elevate a team beyond what their assumed capabilities were, because he did that in Kansas City with Andy, and that wasn't enough. And he was never going to be able to redo that because the Chiefs said we're on the top of the mountain, right? And it was just never going to happen again. Yeah,
and Andy gets the credit for Patrick.
And Andy gets a lot of the credit. Right, but other people have gotten the credit before. That was the thing with Bieniemy was not the fourth, fifth, and sixth time he didn't get a chance. It was the first and second time. Yeah. Once he missed on those opportunities, or the league passed up on him on those opportunities, he had to get out, right? Because he was never going to be able to get a chance to reshuffle the deck there.
Yeah, but I don't agree with what Stephen A. Smith said about Andy hurting Bieniemy, but I do think the image of Andy in Mahomes' rookie year, sitting next to him on the sideline, going over, I think that is what owners saw. If that was Bieniemy doing that, Bieniemy would have a job by now.
That you say that, but Jason Anderson, who works with me, does middays on Sports Radio 810, went back to Matt Nagy's last year with the Chiefs in Eric Bieniemy's role. And he actually timed. He counted I don't think he timed. I think he counted how many shots in a Monday night game they had of Matt Nagy versus Eric Bieniemy, and it was exactly the same. He said it was Kafka that was getting the shots as the quarterback guy because Nagy was overdoing offensive coordinator things. That became a theme that Andy's over there hogging up the spotlight, but Andy was over there when Nagy was the guy, right? Like he said, we have this perception because we're trying to figure out why why
Nagy was gone, wasn't he?
Job.
Well, Nagy was gone.
He went back to because everyone's like, well, did Andy Reid do this? And so he went back on 5 years ago to when, you go to the NFL.com, your website, which is a great package where you can look back on all the games. And he actually watched a Monday night game and said, no, the amount of time that Eric Bieniemy was shown was the same amount of time that Matt Nagy was shown when he was the offensive coordinator.
When Smith was the quarterback, when Al Smith was the quarterback.
Yes. He said that.
No, I'm talking about Andy on the bench in between plays, not when they were actually running the offense. When they were on defense.
That's what I'm saying. He said he watched the whole game and was counting. Okay, is Eric Bieniemy getting frozen out because Andy's over here hogging it up? And he said that it was virtually the same. It's just in our head we're looking for something. This was his theory. And I should talk to him because he did more. he did more to it. But he said there really isn't a difference in how much the visibility was of Eric Bieniemy than it was of Matt Nagy his last year. And so his theory, he was saying that it's largely just we're working backwards. Why isn't Bieniemy getting the job? Oh, here it is. When in reality, he's being shown the same amount of time on camera as anybody else is. I do think the narrative is very different, though, for whatever reason. And is Andy Reid stopping that? I don't know. Is he? I can't believe Andy Reid helps all these coaches, is considered a guy who's on the front line of diversity in the NFL, and somehow he's sandbagging Eric Bieniemy.
I don't think that's.
It was just running up the. It was the structural part of the problem. It was probably racial bias at the beginning, the first 2 times, and then after, Bieniemy never, like, once you got to the top, again, all of these coaching hires are about going over expectations. Once you've already reset expectations at a high level, you're just never going to be able to overcome it. I mean, the same thing, Ron Rivera, when he was the defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears during Lovie Smith's time, it was 3 years, and they were like, every single year it was like, are you going to get a job? Are you going to get a job? And eventually they had to let him go, and he had to go to like San Diego or something before people re-noticed him. Like, you know, it shouldn't have to be that way, but I think that's how it has to be in this case for Bieniemy.
Yeah, and the point I'm making about Andy with Bieniemy, I think that you look at Shane Steichen, he gets a ton of credit for Jalen Hurts' development. Like, that is, you can tie that to him being his coach. You look at Brian Daboll, he gets a ton of credit for Josh Allen's development. Josh Allen was like a 52% passer in college. He was a 70% passer in his second year in the NFL. I mean, that's really, when you're talking about offensive coordinators, you have to attach it to something. So either you're a great play caller or you're developing talent. And I don't think Bieniemy got credit for either of those things in the time he's been here.
He didn't get to take a quarterback that had already maybe, not had a stellar season and then stand watch while he had a stellar season.
Yeah.
He got Mahomes from the get-go, which I agree. You either look at it and say, wait a minute, this kid never missed a beat, and he did it with Eric Bieniemy as his offensive coordinator. Yeah. But people look to Andy Reid. Listen, I hope he gets out, because I hope, he has a chance to prove himself in another spot, and he finally gets the chance that I think he deserves. Let's leave with this. Nobody has to pick a team unless you got a team. But I think it just kind of speaks to where we are. We know who the favorites are. The Chiefs are like minus 550. And then I think it's San Francisco. Maybe that's second, Buffalo third. It's the same 6 teams: Dallas, San Francisco,
Bengals.
Eagles, Bengals, Bills, Chiefs. Yeah. Those are the favorites that are out there. Do you have a team?
Look at Eric.
Or do you have he's not going to say Lions, I don't think, but maybe. You never know. Do you have, Eric, I'll let you start. You have a team that you're like, this is the team that's the favorite for next. Like, really is the team that you think is going to win next year as we head into the offseason? Long way to go. We're not holding anybody to do a prediction here. Or do you think it's just, no, it's way too wide open?
No, I mean, look, we're going to go with cats, right? So Jags, Lions. I think that we were out ahead of it this year.
Jags, Lions,
but it's
Bengals.
A third cat. No, it's a third cat. The Carolina Panthers, I think, have a real chance in the NFC this year.
To win the championship, the Super Bowl?
Yeah. you asked me. So you asked me to take a shot in the dark, and I was going to say Lions, because the Lions are going to be playing in February soon. Jeff, just get ready for it.
Okay, yeah.
But the Panthers,
that's the go from the GED to the PhD. Yeah.
The Panthers have not. Who nailed the Lions this year? Did I not nail the Lions, Soren? Did I not?
You called it that 9-8. You called that 9-win season.
Did I not say the Jags would make the playoffs in the preseason? Did I not say Eagles Chiefs in the preseason pick? The people went back and saw. I took Eagles Chiefs.
Well, we'll go over the predictions here in a later.
But here's the thing. Let me talk. The Panthers have a great.
He asked me a question. I go to answer it, and he says, "Let me talk." That's classic. Okay, go ahead.
Good defense. Coaching staff, it looks like a house. Edgerow as the defensive coordinator. Frank Reich, now Jim Caldwell, offensive assistant. Who their offensive coordinator again? They have some other guy, offensive coordinator, who's also very well regarded. They can pick a quarterback high, or they can go with Sam Darnold, who was decent down the stretch last year. DJ Moore is a great wide receiver. Running game was awesome last year, especially against our Lions. The division is hogwash. Falcons suck. Bucks are the worst team in the NFL next year. Bucks suck. And then the Saints are closer to the Bucks than they are the Panthers. Panthers are going to win that division. Then you look at the rest of the NFC. We're talking about Rodgers earlier this show. He's out. Vikings suck. Lions are going to be a house. That obviously it's going to be a battle of cats in the playoffs. Bears suck.
Eagles, Niners.
The Eagles are going to regress, of course, because they're a Super Bowl loser. Dallas lost Kellen Moore. Washington's Washington. New York's New York. And then, the Niners are maybe the one team that I'm worried about. So
Seahawks
the NFC's wide open.
And a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean,
Who's
Jeff.
that?
I said the Seahawks have 2 first-round picks and a Pro Bowl quarterback.
And a Pro Bowl quarterback. We're going to throw Geno Smith. I love Geno Smith.
You see him in that flag football game? Guy was dropping dimes.
He was nails.
Dropping dimes, man.
I'm going with the team that worries, Eric, the Niners. I think they get Brock Purdy healthy, and I think he's their starting quarterback next season. And you got a guy that cheap, even though they've got some, a lot of veterans they got to pay money to. If Purdy is healthy in that game, I almost think they beat the Eagles in that contest. And so still a ton of talent, ton of weapons around them. I think they're the second favorite right now. Are they after the Chiefs? Are they the odds for them?
I think they are second.
The best. So I think, we'll see what happens without DeMeco Ryans running the defense. But, I go Niners right now.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad pick. And we should pivot back to the guy on the first contract, right?
Yep.
Like I know Mahomes overcame it, but he gets even more expensive next year. The Chiefs are not a bad call if you want to say the Chiefs. I think they'll be right in the mix for sure.
Yeah.
The AFC is still a bitch to get through.
Yeah.
I think the Bengals will get better because they've got some room to maneuver. The Bills don't get any better, but they're good enough if they could just be healthy at the right time.
Yeah.
They'll be tough. Yeah.
The Browns get Deshaun for a full season.
Yeah. The AFC gets to be really tough.
Yeah. That's why the Cats in the NFC, the Lions, the Panthers. That's where you got to look.
Okay.
Let them Cats roam free.
All right. I want to thank our sponsor again, Asphalt and Concrete. Remember, they are hiring right now. If you want to be part of one of Kansas City's fastest growing, best companies, they're hiring project managers, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, all staff, starting pay up to $30 per hour, based on experience with paid time off and insurance. Part of the benefit package. You can learn more at GannAsphalt.com. And if your business has any problems of any kind with parking lots, they've been making parking lot problems disappear at Gann since 1994. Find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. Go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the love button. Don't cost you nothing, but does a lot of good for us. We would appreciate it very much. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, saying thank you very much for joining us here on 2 Deep.